and welcome to the latest Packaging Europe podcast. I'm Libby Munford, one of the editors here at Packaging Europe, and I'm pleased to be joined today by Dr. Tim Breker, co-founder and Managing Director of Vytal Global. Now, Vytal won the Packaging Europe 2024 Readers Award for their fully digital experience for reusable food and drink containers. And this was as part of the Sustainable Packaging Summit. And really, I'm checking in with them now, quite timely, as they won for their collaboration with the OMR Festival, which had 80,000 participants. And it was the first large-scale pilot of Vytal's fully digital experience. Now, they won this back in 2024, and then again this year in May 2025, they've collaborated again with the OMR Festival and expanded on their offerings. So really, today I'd like to check in with Tim on how they've expanded since they won this award last year, what their vision is again for the future.
Perhaps you could tell me a little bit about yourself and Vytal for our listeners who may not have heard of you.
Yes, very happy, and thank you so much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be here. My name is Tim. I'm 38, one of the co-founders and managing directors at Vytal. And Vytal is a digital tech platform that enables circularity, that enables circular packaging, namely ready-to-consume food and drink packaging. And we serve the gastronomy industry, entertainment industry, and basically help everyone who wants to get rid of, food consumption from single-use packaging and transform this to reuse.
Lovely. And so your full name is actually Vytal Global. Can you tell me what sort of scale this is on currently?
Yes. So we started Vytal about 6 years ago in Germany and started serving the gastronomy. And we expanded not only from a customer type of view, but also from a geographic perspective. And we're at the moment active in more than 20 countries. About half of them serviced via local entrepreneurs, so franchisees of ours, but equally many countries also served by us. And our latest expansion was into the US end of 2024, where we're now also active with our own wholly owned subsidiary.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you mentioned gastronomy and events. Can you kind of maybe name drop some of the types of things that you've been involved in?
Yes, so important customers for us are all the large contract catering groups that service business campuses, university campuses, but equally stadiums. Last year, we serviced the Euro fan zones in Germany. We served the summer games in Paris. And we also work with a lot of restaurants, especially also some quick service restaurant chains like Kentucky Fried Chicken here in Germany or Pizza Hut. It's really a broad base of customers. We have more than 7,000 B2B customers using Vytal to replace single-use packaging.
Mm-hmm. And just for the record, when were you founded? When did you start Vytal?
So we started working on this idea to create a digital platform for the circular economy back in 2019, and then officially started the company in 2020. And the core conviction ever since is that in order to transform from the linear solution of single use to circularity, we need to leverage technology and data. And this is exactly what we provide to our customers to ensure that there are good business cases switching from single use to reuse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I hear there's a drive and a passion behind what you're saying there. How did you kind of get into this forum? How did you enter into this reusable packaging arena?
Yes, so for me personally, this is the second company that I started, and something that is really, really important to me is that there is impact ingrained in the business model of the companies that I found or that I work for. And so with Vytal, we really have this great opportunity that in our packaging as a service model, revenues directly link to impact. So if we, are successful from an entrepreneurial, from a business perspective, we also maximize our impact. And this is something that truly motivates me, or not only me, but everyone on the Vytal team, that it's very visible and very measurable, the impact that we achieve, and that it's directly linked to the economic KPIs. So yeah, basically all the VC funds that we were able to raise from, that help us build out our vision, they're equally investing into maximizing our impact. And yeah, I think this is a super exciting path, and it's a super exciting industry that we're in, that is still at the beginning. But yeah, if you look at the volumes of single use in the world, there's a massive growth potential.
And how do you raise awareness with the consumers at these events that you're at? So, how do you communicate your goal, your mission?
Well, I think very early on when we started, we went to the TV. So we were part of the German version of Shark Tank, and this is how we created like the first buzz around Vytal. And it's really important, I think, switching from single-use packaging, or from a status quo, to something more innovative, something more sustainable, like reusable packaging. You really need to bring along all different kinds of stakeholders. So both the B2B customers, astronomists, venue operators, event organizers, but also the consumer. And you need awareness on all parts of the circular value chain. And I think this is something that was our focus from the beginning. And we try to use platforms like Packaging Europe and others, but also simply our team and word of mouth, to make sure people understand the benefits of reusable packaging. And I think starting in Germany, we had some advantage over, let's say, international competitors working in the same space, because we have a decades-old reuse system for beverage bottles, which is very well accepted. And so there's a knowledgeable consumer in Germany that has already understood the benefits of reusable packaging. And we're building on this and really aiming to transport or export all these standard operating procedure, this knowledge, the learnings from the German reuse market to the rest of the world.
That's really interesting. I didn't realize that you've been on Shark Tank. In the UK, it's called Dragon's Den, so slightly different concept. But
oh yeah, and in German, if you would literally translate it, it would be something like the lion's hole, or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny how these shows slightly change their names.
Slightly different concept. So on that note, you mentioned kind of in Germany, people do have this awareness and understanding already. How have you found it kind of expanding into, say, the US recently, and other places outside of Europe? How has that experience been?
So I think it sounded a little bit easy, in the sense that we do have this knowledge and also the learnings from the beverage bottle deposit system in Germany, but it's still, let's say, a challenge to have people change their behavior and switch from single use to reuse in other contexts. So particularly for us, ready to consume food and drink, there's a lot of learnings that we generated over the first 5 years, where we were basically in Germany working on this transformation, that we're now taking to the US. I think in the US, especially if we look into the gastronomy landscape, they're really many years behind Europe when it comes to packaging solutions, or specifically reusable packaging solutions. On the other hand, we see a strong interest from all types of venue operators, campuses, festival operators, that particularly for their VIPs, but also more and more for the general public, they are interested in making that switch from single-use, mostly cups, to be honest, single-use cups to reusable cups. And if we then take this observation from the US and compare it to the German market as an example from 10 years ago, in these kind of event settings, reusable cups are already the standard, the default solution in Germany. And we're now bringing in reusable food containers here into the mix in Europe. And in the US, we're focused namely on cups. But I think based on the customer conversations that we have, there's also more and more interest in maybe leapfrogging a little bit and also introducing reusable food containers much sooner compared to the market development in Europe. And that's something that makes us thrive over there. But I think it's still on a very small scale, and in such a, let's say, early stage of the market. It's luckily not so important, that they're thinking about reintroducing plastic straws and these kind of things, and the overall climate is not necessarily very sustainability oriented, because it's a business case, and it's important that their VIPs don't drink champagne from single-use cups. That's something that where different motivators play a role, and where it makes sense for them to introduce reusable packaging.
Thank you. And I'm going to ask you a little bit more technically about the packaging you use. Obviously, you've mentioned it's reusable. What materials do you use for it? How many times can it actually be physically reused? What's the process behind your model?
Yes, very happy. So first of all, we're really a tech company, right? So actually we're agnostic when it comes to packaging material. Obviously, it needs to be reusable. At the same time, if you look at the robustness of reusable packaging and the material and all these details, it depends on the use case. And one of the key drivers for both economic but also environmental efficiency is the return rate. And this is something that, for example, differentiates our tech-driven approach from other existing reusable providers, that we can really adapt the way of incentivizing returns from use case to use case. And with the digital library model that we follow in the open gastronomy, we have a 99.2% return rate. And if we apply this return rate, the lifetime of a container is 125 uses. So you really get a lot out of one container, and they circulate efficiently through the system, being returned by consumers, washed by the canteens and restaurants, and then handed out again. So it's really using technology in our platform to operate a highly efficient reusable packaging system.
And perhaps you could tell me a little bit more about the technology side of it. What sort of data do you glean from this? How important is it to rely on this data?
The data is super helpful. The data basically serves two purposes. One is to reduce costs, allow for automation, provide transparency, these kind of things. And the second one is to provide additional benefits, from impact reportings that we can provide, live impact counters, these kind of things, but also engaging with the consumer and kind of bringing consumer data into the mix. So this is something where we create benefits out of the data that our platform generates. And the way this data is generated is really by tracking the number of containers, tracking individual containers. So in the Vytal system, every reusable container has a unique ID. Most of the times via a unique QR code, sometimes linked to an RFID tag. And this way we can really follow the individual containers throughout their life, throughout all the different stakeholders of the reusable value chain. And this is really allowing us to really drastically reduce operational cost for handling reusables, and at the same time create new kinds of benefits like live dashboards, impact reporting, and these kind of consumer targeted engagement offers, which in the end drive the business of our customers.
Brilliant. And just from sort of my perspective, obviously it's designed and useful for particular events like a festival or a 1 or 2 day event perhaps. What can we learn from this model in kind of the rest of our lives? That's quite a wide question there, but I'm just wondering what other sort of potential we can get from this model.
Yes, no, I think, learnings and maybe also sharing a little bit how the perspective on the overall, the broader market for reuse has changed over the last 5 to 6 years, and the experiences that we made. I think it became clear that there are a couple of drivers for successful implementation of reuse. And something that really helps is to have closed environments, like an event, like a entertainment venue, a theme park, a zoo, a cinema, a corporate campus, a university campus. These kind of, let's say, boundaries or closed systems, they really help a lot in adopting reuse or even making it the default, which more and more of our canteen customers and venue customers do, because they have some sort of, let's say, efficient decision making power and some sort of local monopoly. So if they decide to go to reuse, they can really efficiently implement it. And at the same time, the let's say change or need for change of consumer behavior is also really quickly adopted and quickly learned. And the potential inconvenience of needing to return the reusable container is also quite low, because it is such a closed setting and rarely the containers leave that closed space. And in the open gastronomy, a key driver is our network effects, right? Because particularly having the option to return it at multiple restaurants, multiple locations, the own office in the city, that allows consumers the flexibility that they need, right? And that they appreciate, because in the end, once you have a reusable packaging, you've consumed the content, it is kind of a to-do task that you now have. And the easier it is for you to return the container, the more pleasant is your experience. And I think we see these network effects in large cities like Cologne, like Berlin, and so on. And something that is then truly amazing is when these kind of effects combine. So when you have corporate canteens, cafeterias inside business districts, where you have part of this, let's say, fueling of reuse from being a rather closed setting, and at the same time the advantage of having that network. So as an example, in Berlin we see a lot of adoption of reuse for takeaway for delivery food, right? Because it is super convenient to have food delivered to your home and then return, for example, the container on your way to work or at your workplace. And so these kind of things really make it easier and fuel adoption of reuse, which in the end is basically helping us to decide also, when we expand into new countries, like into the US, where to focus on and what kind of use cases to convert first. And this is, I think, the logic also how we expand, really transforming the easier use cases with the most benefits first, and then kind of spreading along to the other use cases, while at the same time building up the technology capabilities and the infrastructure needed to also unlock these further use cases, like, for example, quick service restaurants, who still today serve their food on site with single-use packaging, which is an absolute no-go from my perspective.
And just changing the subject slightly, I want to ask you a little bit about regulations. Do you find that they help or hinder progress within the reusable packaging sector? What sort of arena are we in at the moment with regards to regulations? If you could tell me a little bit about that.
Yes, so I think generally we have made the experience that both can be the case, right? That regulation helps, but also hinders the development and adoption of reusable packaging. And obviously the quality of regulation makes a big difference. I think overall, especially with the PPWR in Europe, we're definitely on a good track, on the right path towards making reuse the default across many of the use cases, where already today we know from scientific research that reuse is most economically and environmentally efficient. And so what we see at the moment, especially in Germany, is really an increase in municipality or local regulation. So cities introducing taxes on single-use packaging, because they are actually carrying the cost of these single-use packaging waste items being littered and discarded in public. So there we see a big driver for reuse adoption, when suddenly consumers also have a strong economic incentive to ditch single use and start using reuse, because the single use item suddenly is 50 cents more expensive than reusable packaging. So that's a big lever, and I think this will definitely drive the market in Germany. And then we obviously are looking forward for the implementation of the PPWR, when actually not only Germany, where you already today have an obligation as a gastronomist to offer reusable packaging, when this spreads throughout all the European countries driven by PPWR, that will obviously also really increase the adoption of reuse. And at the same time, the larger the scale, basically, that we reach, both driven by our own efforts and by making our technology better, unlocking more and more infrastructure services, as well as basically further adoption driven by regulations such as a single-use tax. This unlocks more and more use cases. So actually, I think the speed of development of and speed of adoption of reuse will definitely increase year over year throughout the next decade. And hopefully we will reach the point of having reusable packaging as a default rather sooner than later.
I look forward to seeing how you develop in the next decade on that regard. Is there anything you would like to share with our listeners, our audience today, that you feel we haven't covered in the questions? Anything you'd like to highlight?
Well, I think one thing that I would like to highlight is that in reusable packaging, it's a much more collaborative approach in order to trump the current single-use solution, right? So we have a range of very good partners, corporate partners, that help us on many different steps of the circular value chain. And I want to invite listeners to reach out to us, both if they are part or potentially can be contributing to the value chain of circular reusable packaging, or also if they have their own canteen which still partly runs on single use, and they would like to change that. Because I think reusable packaging, for example, at a corporate or university canteen, is something very tangible to show and really communicate to your employees your sustainability commitments. And this is what we see across all European countries, that more and more employers, more and more corporations, more and more campuses really introduce reusable packaging. And that it's super successful, that it's super fun and engaging, because everyone, both the B2B customer as well as the consumers, they measure how much single use they replace. So it's a very rewarding offer. And so, I just want to send out this invitation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tim. And thank you for joining me for this podcast, for sharing your expertise and thoughts with our listeners and myself today.
Thank you for having me. Have a
No
lovely
problem.
day.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll see you again this year at the Sustainable Packaging Summit, which will be in November. And this year we're holding it in Utrecht at a bigger and more expanded venue. So
exciting.
Yeah, hopefully you can join us at the event there. But thank you for joining today, and thank you to our listeners as well.
Thank you.